Welcome to the solution video for the custom rules challenge. We're going to jump right in here to Visual Studio. So I have Visual Studio 2017 open. So I'll do File, New Project. I'm just going to create a console app. Nothing too complicated here. We'll call this the custom rule solution. Shouldn't rules, but that's okay. And do console.readline at the end. And now we're all set to get started. So we know we need a couple of things. We need a couple of classes for our model. So public class person model. And that will have our string first name, string last name, and here's the one that might get you tripped up a little bit. String postal code, not a number. Okay, it's not an integer, it's actually a string. Now the next one we need is we need a company model. So public class company model. And we're going to make a string for company name. I believe I call it name in the PDF, but that's okay. We can call it company name to be a little bit more specific. And we need a postal code as well. Okay, so now I've created these right inside of my program.cs file, which is not where they should live. But by creating them here, I have this benefit now of just doing control dot. And the very bottom says move type to person model.cs, which will create its own file and move everything over there. It just makes it a little bit easier to do that than to create the file by doing file new item every time. So now I have the company model in its own file and the person model in its own file. So kind of simple, easy to do, and saves me a little bit of time. Now we need to talk through the architecture of how this will work. So we're going to have a method, and let's actually put it right down here. So private static, and let's just say void, and it's going to be called apply rules. We'll pass nothing in yet, but it's going to be a method that we're going to pass in something, whether it be a person model or a company model. And then it's going to process a set of rules. But we don't want those rules to be something where we have to modify this apply rules method every time we add a new rule. So we need some way of passing in rules. Okay, so let's start off with passing in the type, the company model or person model. So we need a type T. And then we will say that this is the, let's call this the data, I guess is the best word for it. This is the data we're going to look at to see, using the rule, we're going to look at the data and say, does this data match what I have in my rule? So that's what we're going to do it. We're going to do a type T, which is a generic. And so what that means is we can pass in any type we want, and it's going to be in that data parameter. Okay, so we're going to pass in T, and we'll use that in all of our rules. Okay, so that's the first thing. But now what we need to do is we need to figure out how do we pass in rules, because we have to pass them in. Otherwise, the apply rules has to change every single time. So I think what we need there is we need either a func or an action. Basically a delegate. Okay, and if you're totally lost in all these words, don't worry. I have a video on YouTube on delegates, and that'd be something to check out because that'll kind of bring it up to speed. But essentially, func and action are two different kinds of delegates. So I think we'll do a list of func and it's going to have two inputs. One is going to be a type T, and one is going to be a Boolean for the output. Okay, so we're going to pass in both our T, and also we're going to return back a Boolean. The Boolean is going to say whether or not it passed the rule. Okay, and then we're going to call this rules. So now what we can do is we can actually finish off our method if we want to. And the one thing I want to think through is, do we want to do the work of console write line in the rule or in this apply rules? I think we want to do it in the rule because we want to pass in that information. So what we'll do is, really don't have to return a Boolean if you don't want. We could just say func T and that's it, or I'm sorry, action T, because it wouldn't return anything, and not return a Boolean. But I think we want to return that Boolean saying yes, it did work, or no, it didn't, even though we're doing a console write line inside of the actual rule. All right, so inside the apply rules, we're just going to do a for each. And we'll say, we're just going to do a var rule in. Our return type, because we want to return yes, it worked, or no, it didn't. I'm going to create one rule. And let's just start off with the first rule in the bonus challenge. We'll come back and create the person rules in a minute. But we're going to say, let's just do a name check. Value in name. And we could even pass in if we wanted to. And let's do that. Just value. All right, that sounds good. So we're going to pass in a value, and it's going to return back. Whoops. Let's actually name it as check for. And let's pass in not string. Sorry. We're going to pass in instead a T called data. We're going to make this a type T. All right. So that matches our signature. Our signature right here is func T bool, which means it's going to pass in a T and return back a Boolean. Pass in a T, return back a Boolean. Okay, so check for value in name. Now, this is going to then look for only one specific value, but that's okay for our rule for now. And so what we'll say is we're going to do a check first for if, and let's look for our data. Data is company model. And we'll say company. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to check to see. and ignore this error for just a minute, but it's going to check to see if this data is a company model, because we're doing a company check here. But if it's not, then we're going to come down here and say else return false, because it's not a company. Therefore, it's not something we can say. In fact, let's make it output. Bool output equals false. We don't even need the else. And we'll return output. Okay. But what we're going to do here is, if the data is a company model, if it is, then we're going to cast that into a new variable called company. Now we have to move up to 7.1 version of C#, not 7.0, which we're on right now. So we'll upgrade in just a minute. But what it's going to do is going to put the data, it's going to cast it into a type company model that we can then use inside these curly braces to check to see if the name contains Corey, but not I am Tim Corey. All right. So let's go ahead and change to, I'm not sure if I can do it from the control dot or not. Upgrade this project to 7.1. Cool. Go for it. Isn't that great? All right. So now that I've upgraded to 7.1, I have that option. Now I can say this. Either way, it stays at false and we return that output. Now, before we do anything else, we also do our console write line, which says a company owned by a Corey. Now, just to be clear on this, we are working with the console in this method, and we are hard coding Corey into this method. And I am Tim Corey as well. Could we change this? Maybe. We might be able to get a little more clarity here on how this works by passing in something as well, or doing a check in a different way. But I think for our sake, we're not worrying about making the entire thing amazing. And what we're working for instead is how to create this rules engine. However, I do try and make things as good as possible, not just say, oh, well, ignore these worst practices. So just know that this is something I tackle quite quickly when it comes to trying to pull this stuff out and in some way make this a little bit more generic. But in our case, since it is a custom rule and every custom rule will be different, I think it's okay. Okay, so just know that's kind of what we're going for right here. We could make it better by making an anonymous method, which we'll do for the person rules, just to kind of show a difference or a different way of doing it. Okay, so this is going to work for now. That's be just fine. This method right here, what it does is it takes in an object of type T. And it says if that object is a company model, put it into company. And then do our check for company name. And if that check passes, set the output to true and do a console write line that we requested. And finally return that true. That's all we need to do for this first rule. Let's do our next rule. Public static bool check for company name. And pass in the same signature. And we'll actually do a similar pattern here. So you actually just copy and paste this. Which if you're copying and pasting, you might want to think about, is there a way you can make it reusable? Okay. But in our case, be a little difficult. Okay. We might be able to, but I'm not going to worry about it for right now. So if company name to lower equals, I am Tim Corey. Output is true, and we just return I'll move this over to its own class file in a minute, but I like to have it here. It is easy to use right now. I'm going to create this list right here. I'm going to create that in my static void main. I should call it rules. Now actually it's going to bite us because main doesn't know about what T is. So it has no clue how to handle that or parse that. Now what we could do is one of two things. One, we can actually declare this as something. So we could declare this as person model, like so, or actually let's just do company model, like so, and that will work. So that's one way of going about it, is to declare it like this. I think what I want to do though, to make it a little bit more flexible, is actually create a new class. So we're going to create I think I want to create a new class. That way you can handle it for later and not have to always hard code it this way. Make it a little bit easier. Okay, so we're going to make a public class, and we'll call this class rules engine of type T. And now what we'll do is we'll create in here. So I want to undo this and make it back to T. And I'm going to cut it out from here and paste it in here. And what I'll do is actually make it public. I don't have to. I could make it private and have a method put it into here. Nope. I think what I'll do is, instead of doing it like this, I will make it a property, an auto property. There we go. That way, again, I can make a method to insert things, but I think I'll just make it public as a public property. And we need to change this to capital R. And now everyone can access it. It's simple. All right. We'll move our apply rules down into here. Make it public, not static. And there we go. So now we don't have to worry about this. We can actually take this T off because we're applying the same T as up here. And so now what we can do is use that everywhere, that T. And now in here, we can just instantiate a new rules engine. Rules engine of type, let's say company model. And let's call this company rules equals new, like so. And now we can start adding rules to our rules list. So company rules.add. And we need to pass in a function. So we can pass in, I need that company rules. Let's make this rules engine instead. That way we're not stepping on toes of this class here, company rules. So now we can say company rules dot check for company name. And rules engine dot rules dot add company rules dot check for postal code. And rules engine dot rules dot add company rules dot check for value in name. So I've added those 3 checks now. And now what we can do is start creating our models and testing them out. So company model. Let's just do company 1, 2, and 3. We'll see the company name equals, let's start off with Acme. And the postal code is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that should pass no rule. And we'll just copy this line. And 4. So 4. This one's 3. This one's 2. We already have 1. Let's run this. There we go. Company 1 is done. A company in New Jersey is company 2, which that's in New Jersey. Yep. Tim's company, and company 3 is done. Yep, because I am Tim Corey. And then a company in New Jersey and a company owned by a Corey is company 4. That's Corey Farms. Okay, so we process those rules dynamically based upon this little thing right down here, which it seems so simple. And yet what allows us to do is apply a set of rules that we create on the fly, really. We can put them in their own company rules class, which can actually move over now. Move type to company rules.cs. There we go. And we'll do the same thing for the rules engine. There we go. So that's actually pretty simple. But let's take it a step further. Let's actually comment these out and say, what if we didn't want to create that company rules.cs? Okay, maybe you want to create something on the fly. Well, not a problem. We can actually use a similar system. So I commented out all of this right here, but I left the rules engine because now what we're going to do is we're going to say, whoops, I'm actually going to comment out the rules engine too. And we'll say rules engine for person model. And just call it rules engine again, equals new rules engine for the person model. I could name it something different and you could call both at the same time, but I think I'll leave them separate, but name them the same because it makes sense. All right. So I could call it person rules engine. That's just long. So let's add our rules. So rules engine.rules.add. And instead of doing something here that is hard coded already, like it's already in a method somewhere, we could create a anonymous method right here. So let's do that. So we're inside of our add, we'll do another open paren, and we're just going to say x, and we'll say equals the arrow function, so equals greater than, and then we'll open up our curly braces, and inside here we'll do our actual work. Let's put a semicolon at the end. And since we're going to have more than one line, what I'll do is I'll actually hit enter here, so we actually have room to put our code. So X represents our input, which is the person model. So we're going to do a similar check that we have for the company model. So let's actually open up the company model. I'm just going to grab this entire thing, copy it, and then paste it in here. We're going to say person model. If data, or not data, X, we didn't call it data, we call it X. If X is a person model called, let's call it person, we'll control dot to rename. And we don't have company names, so let's just wipe all this out and start over. If person dot, the first check is last name dot to lower equals Corey, and person dot first name to lower does not equal Tim, we're going to say that's a match, and we're going to print out possibly related to Tim Corey. All right, so that looks an awful lot like we have in the company rules. In fact, it really is. It's now looking for a person model. But the reality is that we didn't actually have to create, we didn't have to create this method and put it in a class somewhere. We could actually put it right in the code right here, right where we're adding it. It's called an anonymous method. I personally prefer not to create anonymous methods because of the fact that it makes your code look a little weird. But for simple ones, usually simpler than this, but for simple ones, it's just fine. It's easy, it's quick, and it makes sense not to clutter your code up with methods you don't actually want to use anywhere else. So let's do this again for our other rules for Tim. All right, or for the person, I guess. They're all kind of focused on me. Sorry. It's easier to pick on somebody else. Okay, so if initials are, so to lower dot starts with T, and person, whoops, that's last name, so C. First name dot to lower starts with T. There we go. So if the last name starts with C and the first name starts with T, so that's TC, which is my initials. All right. We're going to say that's a valid match. Now, I didn't specify whether or not you should check to make sure it's not Tim Corey, but that's fine. We're not going to check for that. Same initials as Tim Corey, because the reality is I have the same initials as Tim Corey because I am Tim Corey. All right. So there's a second check. And now we need to add one more. And this third check is for postal code. So dot postal code starts with and we have to pass in a person model. So new person model. I'll do this anonymously as well. So it's not being stored in a variable, a named variable somewhere. So first name equals Tim. Last name equals, let's do couch. And postal code equals, let's do a matching one. So 18775. So my first, let's unpin this. My first one. We'll do a couple more. We'll do Tom Corey, which knows that's TC. And we'll do 45451. And we'll do one more that is matches just the postal code. And so we'll do Greg Smith and a postal code of 99835. Okay. And that's it. We'll just need to do our console write lines between them to differentiate. So say person one done. I'll actually do a blank console write line afterwards as well, just to kind of give us a little more space. And person number 2 and person number 3. Let's run this. And there we go. Same initials as Tim Corey. Let's scroll this down so you can see both. So Tim Couch has the same initials as Tim Corey, yes. In the same general area as Tim, 1-8, yep. And person 1 is done because it is not a Corey. Okay, number 2, possibly related to Tim Corey because it's Tom Corey, has the same initials as Tim Corey, and not in the same zip code area. So person 2 done. Person 3 has nothing. They're done. All right. So we've used the same exact rules engine and just passed in different rules to it. Now you may wonder, well, what's the difference between creating this rules engine that you pass in these methods to and just writing the methods in the rules engine itself? And the difference is that there's a few ways we can make this work for us in a way that we don't have to keep changing things. First of all, the fact that I can create new classes and just pass in new rules means I can use this later for something totally different, and the logic doesn't change. Now, the logic is very simple, but that's okay. The main thing is that the logic doesn't change between, person model and company model, and tomorrow maybe product model. That's fine, right? And I could even pass in other rules and it's still okay. For example, I have rules right up here. Let's actually copy these rules, come down here below, and paste them in and uncomment them. Now, you'd think this is going to break something. Nothing broke. Still ran the exact same way. But these are company rules. Well, what's going on here? Remember the company rules, actually all the rules, I can just show you this rule right here. All the rules check for, is it a person model? And if it's not a person model, then don't do anything in here, therefore you return false. So it even handles the idea of having mixed rules of different type that are used to handling different items. So I could create one big rule set and run all of my objects through it, and it's fine because it's going to do a check first to see, is this the right type to be checking? If it doesn't match the type, then we don't even go any further. So there's a lot here you can do with it. Also, because of these anonymous rules, I can actually change this text and this text from variables inside of this static void main. So I can actually create this 5 times with 5 different values for the postal code, or 5 different messages based upon different scenarios. So that allows for a lot more flexibility if you use these anonymous types. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with this. And this type of pattern is one that you really should think about incorporating more often when you're talking about customizable things. Get used to doing the type T's, the generic types, and passing in func or action. That way you can have something really simple and yet something that is set up not only for today, but also tomorrow with no need for additional changes to how this is processed. All right, so that's it. I think we've accomplished both the general challenge and also the bonus challenge as well. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new from it, and I hope that you practice what you've learned. All right, and thanks for watching.